I'm Dr. Deb Butler, and you are listening to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is episode number 377. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Well, hello, all my dear friends all over the world. How are you today? In case you're wondering how I am, I just finished up one of my groups. And as most of you might know, I have a group program going on right now called Thinner Peace in Menopause, very similar to my podcast. And it's a small, intimate group. We are on session 4. And today, what I'm talking about with them, I thought would also be very interesting to you, because this is what I'm seeing so far within the group, is that everybody is now aware of an urge. We are learning how to understand our thoughts that create that urgy feeling, because an urge is a feeling that comes from a thought. So for instance, when you have an urge to eat a cookie, the cookie is not creating the urge, but you have a thought about the cookie, which is, that is really good, or that is my favorite, or, I need something sweet. Those are thoughts or sentences that go on in your head that create this urgent desire or urge to eat it. So food itself, cookies themselves, do not do anything until your mind thinks something about them. And what I notice in my group, and what I notice with most of my clients, is our minds have a lot to think when it comes to urges, because it's been thinking it for a long, long time. And we have not noticed that we're the ones that are creating the urges, because we thought the food was, and that we were out of control with the food. But if you've been listening to me long enough, or if today is the first day you've ever listened to me, then this is what I want you to learn from me right now. Food does not create urges until your brain thinks something about the food that creates the feeling of an urge, or what we call an urgent desire. And what I teach all of my clients and students is that an urgent desire can be rated from a 0, which is neutral, to a -10, which is very, very strong. It's also what I call emotional hunger. And emotional hunger is like an emotional hole, or a hole that you feel in your body, a vibration, a negative vibration, such as an urge. And depending on how strong it is, will depend on how much you want to fill it with food. So that being said, what my students understand right now, and what I want you to understand, is that your mind creates urges. Now, I have a favorite Buddhist teacher. I am not a Buddhist. You don't have to be a Buddhist to hear what I'm teaching you or what this teacher teaches. It's a beautiful philosophy. You can be any religion, any spiritual tradition. It doesn't matter. I think it's just helpful. But one of my favorite Buddhist teachers is Pema Chodron. And in my groups and with my clients, I always recommend that they read her book, Taking the Leap, because what she does in that book so brilliantly is she takes a 5,000-year-old Buddhist technique, and I think she applies it to what I call urges. So I have a lot of tools on what to do with urges, but I've also learned from her Buddhist philosophy on some more tools that I want to teach you right now. And it's also what I've been teaching my students that I want them to understand. So one of the techniques, one of the tools, one of the words that she teaches in her book that I have used on podcasts before, but I don't think I can repeat myself enough, is this term called Shenpa. And basically what Shenpa is in the Buddhist tradition is that Shenpa is either being hooked or being pulled in. Being hooked by an emotion and then feeling like you're out of control when you feel it. Now, when she talks about Shenpa, It can be, for instance, if you're really angry and you just react with mean words, you're hooked. If you are seeing a cookie and your brain says, ooh, that looks good, you are hooked. It's called Shempa. And once you think the thought and once you feel the urge, you're in it. So she gives us some ideas on how we can deal with Shempa or with the hook or being pulled. Because for any of you who have ever had an urgent desire to eat anything and feel like the food is controlling you, that is Shempa. Anytime you've lost your temper with somebody else, it's because you were hooked and it was Shempa. And for the practice of this podcast, and for you who are learning how to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, especially if you're in menopause, is to learn how Shempa affects you. 5,000-year-old word that actually just means an urge. And I love to use those two together because Shempa, I know you would never understand what that word is, but once Pema Chodron talks about it in her book, which I highly recommend you read, called Taking the Leap, you will really understand why they're so connected. So in her teaching, one of the things that she teaches that she learned from one of her teachers about Shempa is a metaphor she uses to try to explain how Shempa works and also to help understand how to handle Shempa or how to handle an urge. So I want to read this to you from her book, and this is what she says. She says her teacher used a helpful analogy to describe the challenge of staying present to life's discomfort. They said that we humans are like young children who have a bad case of poison ivy. Because we want to relieve the discomfort, we automatically scratch, and it seems a perfectly sane thing to do. In the face of anything we don't like, we automatically try to escape. In other words, scratching is our habitual way of trying to get away, trying to escape our fundamental discomfort, the fundamental itch of restlessness and insecurity, or that very uneasy feeling, that something bad is about to happen. Now, I want to interject here before I keep reading that when she talks about this restlessness and when she talks about this fundamental discomfort, I'm talking about urges. And I think they go together. I think you could use either one and it would mean the same thing. So she goes on to say when she's talking about poison ivy is that we don't know yet that when we scratch, the poison ivy spreads. And pretty soon we're scratching all over our body. And rather than finding relief, we find that our discomfort is escalating. In this analogy, the child is taken to the doctor to be given a prescription. And this is equivalent to meeting a spiritual guide, receiving teachings, and beginning the practice of meditation. Meditation can be described as learning how to stay with the itch and the urge to scratch without scratching. With meditation, we train in settling down with whatever we're feeling, including the addictive urge to scratch, the addictive urge to avoid discomfort at any cost. We train in just staying present, open, and awake, no matter what's going on. Left to our own devices, however, we'll scratch forever, seeking the relief we never find. But the doctor gives us wise advice. You have a bad case of poison ivy. It's definitely curable, but you'll have to follow some straightforward instructions. If you keep scratching, the itch will get much worse, that's for sure. So apply this medicine and it will help you to stop. In this way, your misery will start to lessen and eventually cease. If the child has enough love for him or herself and wants to heal, that unhappy child will follow the doctor's instructions. He or she will see the obvious logic of the doctor's words and go through the short-term discomfort of feeling an itch without scratching. And then gradually, the child will reap the benefit. It isn't the doctor or anyone else who gets rewarded. It's you as you find that the rash starts to get better and the urge to scratch gradually goes away. As many of us know, particularly those of us who have had strong addictions, It can take a very long time to learn to be with the itch. Nevertheless, it's the only way. If we keep scratching, not only does the itch get worse, but we find ourselves more and more in a very bad place. Our lives become more out of control and more uncomfortable. I think Pema Chodron, the way she states this story in this metaphor about poison ivy, just apply it to your urges and think of an urge as a scratch. Think of your urge as poison ivy and giving in to the urge, eating something that your brain is telling you is going to help, only makes it worse. It makes the urges more urgent over time. If you stop giving in to the urge, just like she says with the poison ivy in the story, as the doctor says, the less you give into it, the less you scratch, the more you're going to heal. The less you give into your urges that feel so urgent, and the more you stay present with the discomfort of the urge, the more comfortable you get and the less urges you have. And I hope that that makes a lot of sense to you, because I think it's brilliant when we talk about urges and talk about poison ivy. You who are listening to me, who have these urges from 0s to -10, some very strong, some not so strong, just think of it like poison ivy. If you give into it, it gets stronger. If you allow yourself to feel the discomfort, the itch, the less it will itch, the less it will get your attention, the less urges you will have. Now, I think this is wonderful for a technique that's been given to us almost 5,000 years ago. And I think it's perfect with urges. Now, the other thing that she says that I also would like to share with you in part of this book is what to do when you feel this shempa or these urges, when you feel this pull. 3 steps that you can take that will make it itch less. It's kind of like the medicine. And think of me not as your doctor, but as your teacher, that if out of love for yourself, just like a child, out of love for themselves, when they hear that the itching only makes it worse, out of love for themselves, they understand that they have to stop scratching. And it's the same for you. Out of love for yourself, the more you stop giving into the urges, the less the urges will stop trying to get your attention. You will stop the scratch and stop the itching by not itching, by not giving in. Shempa, being hooked, feeling like it needs to be scratched, knowing that the more you scratch it, the worse it gets, is the same thing as giving in to an urge. The more you sit with the discomfort, just like the discomfort of the itch, the easier it becomes to handle it. And you have less itching over time, and you will heal over time. So here are the 3 steps that Pema gives in her book on how to handle urges or itching or scratching. Number 1, first, you acknowledge that you have an urge. It's the acknowledging that this is an urge. Let's say you see a cookie and you notice that you have a thought that looks good, and you're aware that you just thought it. That's step number 1. You're aware that you have an urge. You acknowledge it. Number 2, you pause. And in this pause, you take 3 deep, meaningful breaths. And you just let those breaths come through. And when you're pausing and you're breathing, you notice what this feels like. It's almost like you taste it. You feel it. You abide with it. You lean into it and describe it to yourself. So you pause, you breathe, and you describe the feeling wherever it is in your body. And then number 3 is you relax and you move on like it's no big deal. You don't make a big dramatic thing about it. You just move on. Now, here's the thing I want to tell you. On that 3rd step, where you relax and move on, if you notice, or if you eat it anyway, after doing those 3 steps, you still are learning and it will still help. So don't think that if you give into it after that, that it didn't work. because what it will do, it will help you be stronger the next time because you brought your awareness up. So if you give into it or if you don't, if you go through those 3 steps, it will help. That's what I want to offer you this week because, hey, we're in the middle of summer. We're in the middle of vacations. We're in the middle of a lot of social activity. And there are probably a lot of things that create thoughts in your mind that will create the urgent desire to eat something that you don't want to be eating. And if you follow these 3 steps and you think about that urgent desire as an itch with poison ivy, then when you give into it, it's like itching the poison ivy. And when you don't give into it, it's like allowing your poison ivy to heal. I love it. I want you to try this. This is the week you sit with yourself. You learn a little bit about what hooks you. You learn a little bit about what urgent desires feel like in your body, and you're not afraid of it. You allow yourself to feel it and describe it, and you will be on your way to feeling very, very powerful around food. And of course, I would not end this podcast without saying to you, no matter where you go or who you're with this week, please, please, please be very, very kind to yourself, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye. If you're loving my podcast and you would like some more information to be able to follow along with, then please go to drdebbutler.com/change, and you can get a free copy of my companion book that goes with this podcast that I refer to in many different episodes. That is drdebbutler.com/change, CHANGE.